Hello and good morning, everyone watching on TTG's Facebook page. It's Senior Reporter Tom Parry here, and welcome to the latest in our Business Support Live sessions, where we hope to offer advice and guidance, or tips and inspiration, really, to help businesses through the coronavirus crisis. This morning, it's all about how to reopen your high street agency safely, securely, following guidelines, and also a look at how perhaps the travel retail landscape might change in sort of the brave new world that we find ourselves post-COVID-19. I'm delighted to say we've got a fantastic panel with lots of different experience with us this morning. We've got the Chief Executive of the Advantage Travel Partnership, Julia Lo Bue-Said. Julia, how are you?
Ah, yeah, really good. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic, no problem at all. Just below me, perhaps we have Cathy Jackson-Spence from Wetherby Travel up in Yorkshire. Cathy, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And we have Michael Weedon, Chair of the Federation of Small Businesses, Retail and High Street Policy Unit. Michael, a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you very much. Nice of you to roll out my incredibly long title. Thank you for having us.
I did wonder how it was going to go, sort of saying that this morning, but I think we've just about got it. Well, yeah, as we all know, really, and everyone sort of watching is aware. I think it was on the 10th of May, Boris Johnson sort of set out this phased reopening of our lives and sort of the high street and things going forward. I wanted to start sort of from the agent's point of view, asking Cathy, from that announcement, sort of when do you think you will reopen your doors? Is it sort of the June, so it's quite a vague sort of June date, isn't it, at the moment? Is that where you're sort of looking to reopen to customers?
Yeah, I think we should be lumped in with the general retailing opening. So as soon as that happens, then we need to be ready to go, really. So yeah, early June, I would imagine.
Yeah, and some of the policies and some of the sort of measures that you've taken and already put in place, can you sort of talk through what some of those are? I know you've put up sort of protective screens, haven't you, so far?
Yeah, I mean, we're on the high street. We're quite fortunate in so much as we're quite a large premises and we're already evenly spaced out. But we had a risk assessment. We had somebody come in and say, you know, if we were to open our doors, are we going to put any of our staff or any of our customers in any potential danger? Unfortunately for us, because our desks are over 2 metres apart, and because we could facilitate the screens, then we're in a good place to open. So that's the first thing that we've got going for us. We've had the screens put in, they're movable, so if social distancing stops, which it will do at some point, we haven't, you know, ruined the landscape of our shop forever. It's something that can just be moved away. And the other thing that we've got is we've actually got 2 doors. We've got a front door, which is obviously how the customers would come in. But if there were customers waiting, they wouldn't have to pass them. They can leave by a back door as well. So we ticked all the boxes. And just the other thing that we've put in place, hand sanitisers for the staff on the desks. And we've got a hand sanitizer unit, which is foot operated. And somebody comes in the shop, they put their foot on it, the hand sanitizer comes out, and then we know that they're as clean as we can get them to come in and talk to us.
And was that all sort of came from the risk assessment there? And how did you go about doing that? Was it a local company? And how would you sort of advise other members and agents watching to do so?
Yeah, I mean, this was a local company. But really word of mouth that we heard that he was actually doing hairdressers, getting them ready for opening. And, you know, we go anywhere now, you go into your local supermarket or into the local newsagents, they've all got screens and barriers. So it seems something that the public almost expect now. Yeah, we found him by word of mouth, came round, did a first-class job, very quick, and not expensive. And I think the not expensive is the key as well, because we can't be doing massive shop refurbs to get them open again. We have to work the best with what we've got.
And Julia, from your members' sort of point of view, is it sort of similar measures and similar policies that you've heard from them as they look to reopen?
Yeah, I think so, Tom. I think, you know, at the minute, as really Cathy said, everyone is looking at, you know, other retailers. You know, we've seen them, and I saw this morning there's a couple more retailers announcing shop openings. The big thing I think we need to clearly work through is customer confidence and ensuring that consumers feel comfortable and confident in walking in stores. And some of the measures that Cathy has mentioned there, I think will be absolutely on the list. we're launching this afternoon our campaign, which is around supporting members, around putting in place safety precautions and making sure that they can take their own risk assessments on, undertake those, and put in place the necessary safety measures that they need to do. So that's something that we'll be rolling out today. But I think the top of the list is making sure, as Cathy quite rightly said, not everyone's got a huge amount of funds that they can invest in refurbishing their stores and putting permanent fixtures in place. But really important that there are there's adequate measures in place to ensure consumers can come in and feel comfortable and confident at walking into their retail premises.
So for you, do you think that's sort of the next big focus for Advantage as a as a group, to sort of get that message out there, or that consumer confidence message, and to support members in doing that as they look to reopen?
Yeah, the first step is supporting members. So it's how do we support members to ensure that they can confidently open up their stores if that's right. But also there are other scenarios as well. So a number of members won't have the luxury of a front and back door. They may not have the luxury of 2-meter desks. So it's actually, how do they operate in an environment, maybe through appointment systems, and that's going to be more and more become the norm. Appointment systems, whether that's through the door or virtually, obviously like now. Bearing in mind, technology doesn't always work, as we all uncover now and again. So it is making sure that they can adequately run their business with the tools they've got in premises that maybe haven't got the ability of luxury of implementing screens or other measures. How can they continue running their business when the time is right? And certainly appointment systems is something that we're speaking to members is becoming more widely acceptable, and I think customers have become more comfortable with that as well. And again, we're all consumers and thinking about what would we feel comfortable with. Is actually how can we educate the members to work through those bases as well.
Just anecdotally, are you hearing that most members in England are looking to reopen next month? I know it's difficult to have sort of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, all the sort of the sister nations as well with different policies. How are you sort of advising members in different ways? And do you think the majority of English-based Advantage members will look to reopen as soon as possible?
I think it will be everything that I've based it on, just what I've talked about just now will depend. So we have an advisory group and spoke to them earlier in the week, and a number of those are opening in the next couple of weeks. And others will be looking at actually what do I need to do in my premises to make sure that I can operate in a safe environment. Also, I think there are so many factors, your staff, where how do you keep your staff safe as well as your consumers safe. So what we want to make sure we can provide our members with is a checklist that enables them to ensure that both from staff and a customer perspective, they can open confidently, making sure they've got the right measures in place. And when there's no price for opening first, it's making sure that you can open in the right manner, in a safe manner. But in the meantime, until you open your doors, how can you run your business, and how can we support our members running the business virtually through appointment systems, which is something we're looking at as well.
And Michael, and from a sort of a wider retail point of view, I know the Federation of Small Businesses has loads of members across loads of different sectors, and you've been speaking to government very, very closely. So what sort of are you getting from that in terms of, do you think there needs to be more clarity on which particular types of retail open when? I'm going to say, what sort of messages are you getting from them? And I suppose, are they aware of the need for businesses to reopen as soon as they can to bounce back?
Yeah, it's a balance between the two. Businesses do have to reopen, especially as we're coming towards the end of furlough. You can see it in sight, and some businesses are going to be open earlier than others. So that's going to affect their cash flow. This is a survival issue, and of course, the point of putting money into these businesses was that we wanted to avoid huge redundancies across the economy. There are 250,000 small shops in the country, across the whole UK. It's an astonishing number, and one of the points we've made to the government is that they're all very different. The number of little verticals you'll find on a high street is extremely varied. They ain't all the same. And one of the interesting things we find with small shops, which on average have I think about 2,000 square feet, they've probably got 6 staff and so forth, limited space and a lot of stock. So if you look at other shops where they're actually selling product, which is about 30% of shops in any given high street, well, one of the big issues they're going to face is, which you will be able to avoid in this particular area, is people come in and rummage around, but they're rummaging around and you have to control what they can and cannot do in the stock. There is, we think, an interesting thing, particularly associated with high streets, that controlling what happens inside your shop is a matter of planning and preparing the shop. And frankly, we think it would be a good idea if the government provided, we keep saying to them, a voucher for each of them to do things like provide screens and PPE and signage. Signage is absolutely vital. Someone coming into a shop needs to know very clearly what to do, what not to go, what not to do, where to go, where not to go, when to do it, stand here, go there. There can be no ambiguity about this. It's going to be expensive. 1/3 million shops we've got to prepare in this particular case. Now, the government's provided 31 pages of guidance for retail in reopening. And everyone at the meetings I've been at, large retailers and small ones, have welcomed that. The trouble is, the devil with these things is always in the detail. So we've got two issues, really. Better guidance about who can be doing, who can be opening, better guidance about what they have to do to reopen, and some help in doing it. But that time is that really big challenge, knowing what is going to happen when, because retailers have got to be ahead of those reopenings. You may have noticed that some of the big hardware stores, B&Q for example, opened about 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks after lockdown. They could have been open the whole way through. And actually they spent that time planning what they were going to do. And I've got to say, not just doing their risk assessments, but I can guarantee they were talking to their insurers about it. Because we mustn't forget, behind all of this, there is the idea a lot of people have that there's going to be a tsunami of litigation. And actually putting that risk assessment in the window is going to be important for confidence for your staff, having done it, and for your customers as well. They've got to know that you're trustworthy. I backed away from going to a shop the other day, it was a garden centre actually, because it looked like there was a chaotic arrangement around it. Can I just say one more thing? You can't just think about the inside of the shop. As we saw with, supermarkets and B&Q, you've got a big car park, you can actually order things. But actually, if you're on a high street, how do you manage a queue? So I think you're absolutely right, Julia, talking about appointment systems. This is all of a sudden going to be an important thing. I guess when it comes to hairdressers, people ain't going to be queuing, for example, and barbers and so forth. Those things are going to be where life gets really changed as we move on. I've taken enough time, I think.
No, it's a problem. This is great discussion. And we'll definitely get onto sort of the future of the high street and future of retail in a moment, actually. I suppose that the point about communication and communicating what you're doing to customers and putting their minds at ease. Cathy, how have you sort of gone about communicating to customers to say, this is what we're doing? And is it a case of being as vocal and as active as possible to show them what you're doing to support them and your own staff, I imagine, as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, we are on the high street. We're in a market town that's actually remained quite busy and buoyant because we've got a local butcher's and a greengrocer's and a hardware store, and so shops have still been open, so there's been plenty of footfall. And what I've found is I've come into work every day. I can't work from home. Internet just doesn't work where I live. So I've come in to the shop every day on my own. This is my sort of isolation spot. But it's really given the customers confidence as they've walked past to see me in there and to wave and to come to the door and say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Will we be going in September? So And that's one of the things that I think is important about the shops opening up again. There's so much negativity out there. Are airlines going to go bust? Are the cruise lines going to survive? All the travel experts that are putting doom and gloom out there. If we can show a bit of positivity in our industry, that our shops are still surviving, we're still open when we can be open, and we're operating and we're working, I think that's going to encourage people that travel is still something on their agenda and nothing to be afraid of. I mean, another example I've got is a friend of mine in this town has a dress shop. Another friend has a dress shop. One friend cleared her window out, put the notice on the door and said, due to COVID-19, we're no longer operating. The other friend changed her window every week with new things, put a notice and said, you can order online or give me a call. Her business has flourished because she's maintained a presence. And so I think it's important that we do that.
And that's a great point, actually, sort of almost imbuing more consumer confidence.
Yeah.
And Julia,
they know we're here and they know we're going to stay here. We're not disappearing.
I know you mentioned earlier sort of the Julia, the stuff that you were putting the campaign for members really to give them advice. Would you see any sort of like group-wide advice, or is it very much a case of what's right for every individual member, and you'll only sort of guide on what you think by a case basis? Or
yeah, so we'll produce some basic guidance that will be relative to obviously the whole membership, and so that's going out later today. And as you know, we offer consultancy service for members anyhow. So any members that want a more detailed, discussion with us or support, then we have a one-on-one discussion with them anyway. But I think just building on what we talked about, I think also around consumer confidence, it's that communication. And we've all felt and we've all seen how important communication has been throughout this period. And I think it's no different with the consumer. And so whether it's in your shop window, changing your windows and dressing those very frequently, it's also about the communication you have on a regular basis, whether email or telephone calls with a customer, and giving them confidence in your offering. Obviously, travel's a bit different. We don't sell tangible products, and Cathy mentioned some of the issues the industry is having right now. So it's quite difficult to give that confidence. But there is a huge amount of pent-up demand, and I honestly, genuinely believe coming out of this, the independent retail sector will really stand firm and will have a fantastic opportunity to continue doing really well because of the way they're engaging and communicating with their customer, and they can give that personalised approach. I think the larger retailers, not travel but outside of retail, have the opportunity or have the ability to be able to invest in a different way of normal. But I think for our sector, it's about that confidence. It's about ensuring that consumers can contact you in whichever way they feel comfortable, whether that's through your doors or online or through obviously telephone, etc.
Yeah, it's that specialisation, isn't it, that you get with an independent agent, which I think is going to be so prevalent when we all come out of this and we start to sort of reopen again. Michael,
Tom, can I just say on communication, something that we did, and it was a bit time consuming, but it has been one of the biggest payoffs for us, is we printed some cards and it said, "Sorry, the world is closed, but we're still here for you." And I hand wrote to every one of my customers that has been affected. So every departure that I've got going up to September, whether they were cancelled or they're waiting to use their credit notes or whether they're worried about paying their balance, and just an individual message to each of those has got the most fantastic response. I've had people phoning up in tears saying, I can't believe you wrote to us, because it's handwritten. It wasn't an email, it wasn't a phone call. And that has worked so well. So from a small independence point of view, if you want to get that personal detail across, you've got to be personal.
No, that's a great advice for everyone, isn't it, I think. And in terms of, I was wanting to say, if anyone did have any particular questions or queries they wanted to ask our panel, please do sort of comment below, and we'll sort of do our best to answer those. Michael, I wanted to ask sort of from the guidance that the government has put out there, is everything as set in stone as these are rules you must follow, or we've seen some different approaches from different agencies, some talking about PPE, some talking about not using brochures in store because of sort of contamination or disinfecting them at least, some getting rid of tea and coffee, others, I think one that perhaps has even offered COVID tests to their staff. Is there some sort of hard and fast rules that you have to follow if you're an agency, or is it sort of do a few things that you think will help?
The guidance is very broad, which, as I was saying earlier, so it's a relatively low level of. It still runs to 31 pages. This guidance, but even then, with probably 200 subsectors on any given high street and a third of a million businesses, you can see there's a lot of detail which the government's never really going to get to. And actually, one of the things that is happening now, and it's important for everyone who can get involved to get involved, is that we are having conversations with government. I can't tell you what we said yesterday, but we were talking to the Secretary of State at Bays yesterday. And each took a turn, the business representative organisations, big retailers, small retailers as well, got the opportunity to make points along these lines. Because where they struggle is, if you start to be given guidance, you want all the guidance rather than a bit of the guidance and then make the rest up for yourself. And that is always going to be a challenge. government is a really big thing, and it has always found it difficult to see the details of small markets and small businesses within it. And I don't think that is going to change. The good news is it's listening. And we're having face-to-face conversations with them with all these usual sort of technical problems as well, which is quite heartening in a way that they suffer from it too. But the answer is detailed information. Actually, some retailers are saying don't be too prescriptive. That was said yesterday. Don't pin us down too closely, because we may want, in our particular circumstances, like we've got a front door and a back door, but somebody else hasn't, that if you are too closely controlling on what happens, that may actually be counterproductive for some. Ultimately, it will come down to common sense, how good that risk assessment is, how good your expert is as well. And one of the really interesting points we had to make yesterday, because it came across from the unions who were also in the meeting, is there should be on the shop floor of these businesses a champion who takes on health and safety. And I had to say, well, in the case of almost all the independent businesses I know, it's the proprietor. He's there, you know, so it's not as though there's any distance between the management and ownership and the people on the shop floor. The person who owns and runs it, he's right in there and has all the possible my phone does that as well, all the possible incentives to get that right as well. And I think that's an important thing about independents. They are so close and hands-on.
So do you think it's a case of, if you know, there's plenty sort of independent agency owners watching this now, is it a case of picking the two or three, or to put a number on it, just the few elements that you think most suits their premises and their staff, and then sort of doing them well, as opposed to sort of, like you said, being too prescriptive and following the guidelines by every single thing, do you think?
Yeah, the premises and the staff are the obvious place to start, because all of these places are different sizes, different shapes, different layouts, and you have to start with that. But understanding from the guidance, what are you really trying to do? You are trying to distance safely from people. You are trying to make sure you're not handling materials and so forth that are a bit like brochures, for example, and things like that are going to be a problem. So, for example, if people do actually look at brochures, you've got to have some kind of disinfectant regime in there as well, or take it away and put it and make sure it's not used for the next 24 hours kind of regime. There aren't going to be simple answers to this. This is, and let's face it, this is a crisis. It's a crisis like we've never lived through before. One of the really interesting things, can I just go back to a point you were making earlier about sort of working with, you know, into the future of this? One thing I'm hoping to see is something because I've worked with independent retailers as a trade association director for many years, was I've always said, you always say service is a key thing. Yes, okay, fine. So you might add a website to the face-to-face stuff, but actually I'm amazed how few retailers are doing this and being on screen and talking to people face-to-face, because there's one thing which forms a bond between a customer and a retailer. It's actually that face-to-face communication. And we have now demonstrated, and we all have an enormous amount of expertise, that we can do this just like we are now.
I think you're really...
Oh, sorry, Julie.
Sorry, Tom. No, I was just going to say, to Michael's point, I think you're absolutely right. And I've seen a lot of my members already adopt this way of consulting with their customers. But I think now we're all living in a new norm. And that's, you know, 8 weeks ago, this would never have been normal. You know, we'd have done virtual calls every now and again. We wouldn't even have thought twice of crossing the road if somebody walked in front of us. We wouldn't have thought twice of going out with a mask and gloves on our hands. But these are all new norms. And I don't know about all of you, but actually, I'm comfortable doing that. I'm not uncomfortable putting my gloves on to go shopping. I'm not uncomfortable putting my mask on. So we're able to experience a new norm that we then need to implement in our businesses too. So I think that's, and actually it starts to feel, we can feel whether things are uncomfortable or not. And I think that's really important. So we're living a crisis and having to enact it as well in our businesses as well. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm passionate about our independent travel sector, as I'm sure you are about your retailers, and I know they are best placed to deal with their customers in a manner which has always been important to them, but now be able to demonstrate exactly what they need to do as we continue to go through this. And I actually think social distancing it's going to be around for a long time. So this is not a flash in the pan, let's just do it for a couple of months. It feels that actually all the indications are that it will be around for a while, and therefore we need to make sure that we can expect this to be as part of our norm as we move forward.
And how do we sort of, how do agency owners look to sort of train their staff in that new normal? Because perhaps if it's so different to having a conversation as we're used to, as now perhaps there might be a mask, there might be a screen there. Cathy, how are you sort of, have you put any plans in place or any thought on how you might train your team to sort of to deal with these new sort of interacting in this new world? Or
yeah, I mean, I don't have any staff here at the moment, but I think we're going to have to use our common sense as well. And each customer is going to be different, but it is just one customer sat at a desk at a time now. I'm going to have to tell them that. Whether we do stop serving tea and coffee, I'll talk to the staff about that. Whether we do remove our brochures and only bring them out when we need to show them or whatever. So I need to have a discussion with the team, because I've got to make them feel confident and comfortable in the way that they handle. Every customer's different, but we can have a little bit of consistency in the way that we do things, and we do things safely. We don't want to compromise anybody. So that'll be a conversation that I have with them, and we'll take that forward together.
And sort of looking ahead to sort of the online, new world that we might see. I know that particularly sort of high street retail agents, the word online, perhaps not a dirty word, but a word perhaps people think that it's all about face to face, it's all about in store, which is definitely the case. But Julia, do you think that sort of talking about? I think I've seen some of the guys from White who are saying that they're doing more and more appointment and video stuff as well. Do you think that's just going to become more and more popular? And is that something that you guys as a consortium will look to push and will look to recommend?
Absolutely, definitely. I think, as I say, we can't pretend the world is going to go back to how it was. So looking at what are the solutions, what are the tools that businesses can implement, and the cost-effective manner to allow them to undertake virtual appointment systems. That's something we've got as part of our launch that we'll launch later today. I think the great thing is that independent agents are multi-channeled. So when I talk about our sector, we're not just high street. We're used to social media, we're used to an online presence, we're used to speaking to people on the phone. They're multi-channeled. So we're operating in a different world, but with tools that we have used in the past. And it's actually, how do you provide that blended approach so that it's not all you may have been 50-50 online high street before, and that's going to change, certainly in the short to medium term. So how do we make sure that our agents are best equipped to be able to manage a new type of customer consultation outside of what they're generally comfortable with? If you're comfortable with speaking to customers face to face, you're going to love this. You can see, I can see everyone. I can read I can look at the whites of your eyes no differently to if you were sitting in front of me. I know it's not quite the same. So I think, our agents, independent retailers are prime to be able to use this technology and take it forward. And as customers, we will all be comfortable. We are all comfortable with it now, barring technology issues and broadband issues.
I was going to say we're all at the mercy of sort of slow bandwidth, aren't we? And Michael, do you think that from your experience that independent retailers of small and medium size do put enough investment in their online offering at the moment? And do you think that some do perhaps just want customers coming in through the door, and perhaps they need to sort of expand to that virtual appointments and that kind of concierge service perhaps? Or
my experience of this is that in the travel side, you're actually well ahead of most of the high street. You've been multi-channel for a long time. People want to go and look at pictures of stuff, and you have communicated in a multi-channel way. You said 50-50, I think, Julia. If you look at retail as a whole, in the UK, it's just actually about 20% of all sales are made online, and actually half of that 20% is multi-channel business. So actually only 10% of our retail in this country is pure play online, which is a bit of a surprise because people kind of think it's all gone online. The shocking statistic is that one which came from a social listening company. It's strange that there are such things as social listening companies, but a company called Maybe, who have tracked in detail the online activities of 160,000 individual retail companies, which is mainly the independents, because there are only 900 large retailers in this country. Despite the fact they take up a third of the shops, there's only 900 companies doing this kind of thing. And what Maybe found was that 78% of high street shops don't even have a basic social media presence, let alone a website. So actually, when people are saying, right, what you need to do is get online with a website, for some types of business that's possible, For others, it's simply not going to work. You know, take, for example, I don't know, a small cook shop or a hardware shop or something like that. They might have 20,000 stock lines. They haven't got 20,000 pictures at the moment. Starting now, they've got a real problem. But it can be done. I noticed the other day, and I've used it already just to establish the principle. My local Spa, which is a place that we have walked to get chocolate and really important supplies like that, started doing Snappy Shopper with an app where you can buy. It's a restricted range. They didn't actually say that, but it's a restricted range of what they sell. They're doing live stock levels, so you can't buy the things that they just, you know, the last baguette's gone and so forth. And they're delivering within an hour for £3. So actually, retailers are being very creative and they are doing things. Although I've got to say, I've been encouraging them to do these things for years. It takes a crisis quite often to push people along. And I'm sure in the travel industry, we will see that a big nudge will change some of these things. What will be interesting to see, because you can't really predict how things are going to come out, especially when it's over a long period. There's no vaccine, so elements of this crisis could go on for a long time. We could go back into possibly regional lockdowns, and our business strategy's got to recognize that our resilience has got to build in that uncertainty for an awful long time, pretty much as Julia was saying there. So that future is going to be fascinating, and there's a lot to be done on the independent side, and if they don't get the message now, don't think there are any circumstances under which they will.
I really agree, Michael. I mean, I talk to my members about, you know, being innovative, being creative. They're all entrepreneurs, and actually the entrepreneurial spirit has to come out now more than ever, because it is I said before, it's not a kind of flash in the pan. This is with us for some time, and as you say, there are some very many unknowns. So we need to make sure that businesses can thrive. They can put in place creative solutions around income generation, and be creative around that. And it's really important that everyone takes stock and thinks about how they can be creative. You don't want to ever go through this again, but we might go through another crisis. But we can't risk losing, you know, we can't risk, you know, businesses having to go through the pressure they've had to go through another time without having had the opportunity of thinking about how they can do things differently. But it's tough. It's very tough, particularly in travel right now. We're at the mercy of everybody, government, everyone, borders, everything. So yeah, not easy.
God, yeah, it's almost impossible, isn't it, to try and pick one sort of problem for travel right now, unfortunately, but hopefully things can get better, I suppose. So do we sort of see that perhaps high streets might get, people might still be buying it and you know, looking to buy, but actually high streets might get a bit quieter, especially for in the short term, people looking online, considering how much online investment's been going in for different services and different apps. And like Michael mentioned, is that something that we can sort of predict, that perhaps agencies might have some staff, you know, looking face to face and people come in, other staff just totally focused on online perhaps and selling that way? Or Michael, perhaps, or do you think that that investment in online will perhaps lead to sort of quieter high streets, maybe even in the short term? Or
well, that'd be an acceleration of an existing trend, because if you look at the BRC Springboard figures I've tracked it for the last 7 years, month by month, high street footfall has dropped by 15%, despite the fact that over that period the population has grown by 5%, which kind of underlines the degree to which our habits have already changed. I think it only makes common sense to assume this is going to amplify those habits. I don't think they're going to change them, because that trend line may change its angle, but it's not going to change its direction. Although there will be lots of people who are gagging to get back to a high street, I've been under house arrest by my family for the last 8 weeks or so, and I really want to do two things: go to the local town centre and mooch around a bit, and go to the pub and have a pint and a packet of crisps, neither of which is possible at the moment. So there will be a bit of a bounce as far as that's concerned, but this will be with us for an indeterminate amount of time. We kind of assume that science will suddenly come up with an answer just like that. There is no guarantee at which point that will happen. And so until then, distancing, footfall, all of those things are going to be indeterminate. And anyone running a business has got to think, cash flow planning is always bad at, you know, any particular time, because there's some guesswork, but you can go on previous periods. This is such a jolt to the figures. If you look today at the ONS's sales figures, it's as though you took, have you seen one of those tracks where you get an earthquake with seismographs, where everything's bumbling along and then all of a sudden there's an earthquake somewhere and it does this? The numbers are doing that at the moment. They're doing that for footfall. They're doing that for turnover as well. And they're going to be jiggling around for some time. How you actually plan a company's next steps is going to be really difficult, because we all know when you run a company, you actually run it into the future, don't you? You're always looking where it's going. How many staff do I need? What's the environment going to be like in terms of business? Where we're going to be in a year's time, 5 years' time? Right now, that's extremely difficult. And the particular difficulty is that period within which it applies. So that's why one of the things we've been doing at the Federation of Small Business is saying to the government, okay, we know this is expensive, but if you don't, for example, taper away furloughing, the businesses you've tried to save by taking the weight of staff costs off them, if they come back into full business with their staff costs, but they haven't yet recovered in income, will still collapse. So they have to think very flexibly about this. And they frankly will have to think about borrowing for it. And we'll have to think is, at the end of that, we've all got to pay for it.
True, isn't it? And do you think there's perhaps a point for the government, they might be able to offer investment and reimbursement to people who are getting their stores ready? I think you mentioned it, we sort of touched on it earlier, that because Cathy, how much of sort of the things that you've put in place, how much have they cost, if you don't mind me asking? Has it been sort of like a long-term investment, or has it been quite relatively sort of cheap? Or
in terms of the protective screens and things, I think they're relatively cheap. I think they're about £100 each. So, you know, I need 3. So that's a good investment to me.
And Michael, do you think there's any way that the government might reimburse businesses on that, or do you think it's basically get yourself ready for business, or don't open?
No. We've given them the idea of, we've called it back to work vouchers. And we think for small businesses, a back to work voucher, and we've actually put on that a sum of £350, because most businesses are 1 till and so forth. So 1 screen, some signage, some PPE. We can't ask for too much, but we think that will be a rational thing to do. Given the number of shops there are on high streets, you'd probably looking at a cost of that to the government of something like £90 million, which in comparison to some of the other sums we've been looking at is tiny. But we think it's valuable just to help people get across that, to prepare themselves properly, because we all need the economy to bounce back as strongly as possible.
So in terms of where you are with those discussions, that's a likely outcome that you might be able to get, or is it just sort of an idea at the moment? Is it all just discussions right now?
We keep saying it to all the ministers we can find, and all the bureaucrats we can find, and any media people who come along and ask about it. And that's actually the way that, and I don't need to tell association people this, that's actually the way that you get these changes made. You talk, you suggest in the right ears. You know, when furloughing came about, and particularly the self-employed support, we were involved heavily in the negotiations for that. None of that was on the table at the beginning of the discussions. None of that. They had to be talked into it. But they are looking for ideas. So there's an idea. You know, it's not done with any selfish interest. It's help us do this. You want to get the economy open. Here's a suggestion, do it. We won't shut up about it, frankly. And it's very important now, because where you're seeing the likelihood that significant numbers of shops will open from the beginning of June, they actually need to be preparing it now. You know, we're hearing about shortages of plexiglass for panels and things like that, and the manufacturing is under pressure there as well. We've certainly heard all the stories about PPE. You know, it needs to be in hand already. The risk assessments have to have been done. How you do that, I think, for really hands-on things like barbers and hairdressers, I dread to think, frankly, and we'll be finding out from them as well.
Yeah, and Julia, do you think that's a campaign that Advantage and you know, the wider industry should back? Really, it seems like it'd be really good to, obviously, with travel businesses with revenues as they are right now, that would be good to get some sort of reimbursement from the government as people open their shops to get the economy going again. Is that something that you would support at Advantage?
Yeah, I think anything that enables agents to open up, those that want to open up their high street premises, and they are able to, you know, have that reimbursed or as a grant from government, I think is helpful. But I just wanted to say to Michael, I don't know what your view is in terms of the travel industry. How as the Federation of Small Businesses, do you view the travel industry? Do we work united? Because we are also, you know, my members are all small businesses mainly. But we have a lot of the travel industry that also is made up of small businesses. But it'll be great to think in the new world there's a bit more of a united conversation around supporting small businesses, regardless of what sector they're in.
Yeah, and we were doing this exactly yesterday in Nottinghamshire with an MP. It's always valuable to engage at that local level because they talk when they're at Westminster and they talk to their ministers. With FSB members in the room who were small agents, for example, for local families and firms that have holiday cottages in Derbyshire. So actually, we brought together their information to us. Basically, you've got someone who's a part-time agent for these things, and I'm guessing that that's prevalent right the way across the country. That there are people who are partly in the trade, partly out of the trade, which in his case is 50% of his earnings come from the travel side as an agent. He's in severe trouble because he's being pulled two ways on the money. Give us the money back for the things we booked, but can't get it from the cottage owners that he's got it from. So the answer is we've got in all about 25,000 retail members, in which we wouldn't necessarily count travel because that would be a services thing and leisure as far as we're concerned. But the answer is yes, get involved by all means. One of the nice things, I mean, I got involved as a member because, not as an advert for them, it's because I wanted to make my voice heard as a small business to get that to government. And the amazing thing is you can go straight to it and talk to prime ministers and ministers and so forth, but do it at all levels. So yeah, absolutely. We're doing a lot of talking to other associations as well, as we were previously, but it's got a great deal of urgency now. Thank you, Julia. Yes,
absolutely.
That's great stuff. And yeah, I think we're close to wrapping up really. But I wanted to go around and say, sort of ask everyone what their I don't know, top tips or what their sort of most pressing point would be in terms of preparing to reopen. I know it's different in different parts of the UK and people need to have different things in mind. But Cathy, from an agent's point of view, what would your peers, what would your sort of top nugget of advice be, I suppose?
Keep communicating really well with your existing customers and put out that positive message to future customers. So make your shops still as exciting and as inviting as they were pre-lockdown, and be optimistic because there's hope.
And Julia as well, from sort of obviously dealing with different members, different sizes, different premises. Like, what would you sort of say to them, say to your members?
I would say that there really are no prizes for opening first. Make sure that you can, when you are ready to open and you can open confidently and you're comfortable that you can provide a safe environment for your staff and your customers, then obviously we'd be there to support them anyhow. All the guidance that we'll be sending out later today will support the members. But I said it before and Cathy said it there, communication is key. You can still run your business and operate your business without physically being in your office if you're not comfortable with that. So keep communicating with customers and make sure that they are aware of how they can get in touch with you, but that you are there to support them. And we're human agents after all, so we're not faceless agents, and to keep that definitely front of mind.
And Michael, from perhaps a wider sort of business point of view, what would be your sort of key takeaways for people to take from this session when they're planning to reopen in the future?
Given we don't know when this will end or how, very much it will be plan for the worst, hope for the best. We have to be, I would say, hopeful. I don't use optimistic and pessimistic because they both seem to me errors in some ways. They both seem a bit of unreason in both of them. Being hopeful is sensible because otherwise you just give up and not doing anything. But planning for the worst means for things like a change in your business where you may have to take opportunities like talking to people face to face online from a shop. For example, a shop makes a great studio, which is effectively, what we're all doing. We've turned our house into 3 different studios for the 3 different working individuals we got in there. Shops can be the same kind of thing. And I think taking those opportunities, which are demonstrably there, is going to be important for the future. So that still comes under planning for the worst in the way, but it seems like a good idea.
I was going to say, it seems like a very good idea considering the different twists and turns that are happening sort of hourly, if not daily. So thanks everyone. I hope everyone who's watched us has found this interesting and hopefully some good advice to take away there. Thanks everyone for joining me. Hopefully things do reopen and we'll get back to business as successfully as possible. But thanks everyone for watching, and thanks everyone for joining me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.